The main purpose for us meeting this morning is to kind of update you on what's been happening in the last week and a half since we last met. I want to tell you where some of the bills are that we've heard in this committee, or even in an ag committee. House Bill 2085 on extending the permits issued for water pollution control from 5 to 10 years in KDHE. Last I heard, that's on consent calendar over in the Senate. 2095 was established, or the pump installation contractor's license that we heard. That didn't survive turnaround. What's that? I think that was over in ag. Some of the bills that Ken Rogers ran in ag committee, so that one didn't survive turnaround. House Bill 2111 was CREP acreage cap to 60,000 acres. I believe that's still in Senate ag and hasn't moved. House Bill 2112, operator certification that Sandy was working on, that did not survive turnaround by Rule 1507. 2013 bill was our $22.5 million funding bill to increase the 2302 funding. That's still in Senate Ways and Means, and they've reduced several times. I'm not sure what the level is today. This afternoon I have a meeting with Representative Waymaster, and we'll give them a number to the best of our ability, what we're going to ask for, and see if that can be approved in appropriations. Mainly they want to know the priority areas that if we do get some additional funding, where we would put it, where we would recommend. As it's gone through appropriations and Senate Ag and now over in Ways and Means, some of the people don't have quite the same background of experience with water issues, and they've moved funds to all kinds of different programs. So now they're coming back and asking us where we think it should go to. House Bill 2114, rules and regs for watershed districts and their inspections. I think that's still in House Ag. Irrigation districts 2153, that's still in House Ag. And there's one bill left in our committee here, House Bill 2345, and that was the combination of some of the agencies here in the state of Kansas, a reorganization bill. Does anybody have any information on any other bills that pertain to water? The task force bills currently being heard right now in Senate Ag. Still not finished?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. From what I can tell online, Senate Ag did pass a balloon amendment reducing the number of members of the task force down to 12, but there were some conceptual amendments, and closed captioning isn't great on YouTube, so I will get details about that. But they did pass it favorably as a Senate substitute bill with some amendments.
Senate Bill 58 is supposed to be heard in House floor today. Shouldn't be a problem. Hopefully that'll go through. We didn't make any changes here in this committee, so that wouldn't be conferenceable. What else? Part of my discussion this afternoon with Representative Waymaster and Appropriations, the money in 2023 that we set aside for the payment of the reservoir contracts, we put 50 million over there, and I have a sheet from the treasurer's office that says the book value of that today is about 56,634,000. So it's garnered quite a bit of interest. With the change from compound to simple interest on our contracts with the Corps of Engineers, we have far more money over there than will be required to pay those off. And I think at this time, we could bring a little bit back into the general fund for the state of Kansas and be able to utilize that for some of the 2113 programs we were asking for. If not, we need to bring it back anyway and put it back into the budget for anybody to use rather than leaving it over there just on interest, in my opinion. We're working, Kyle, Chris, and Luke, you guys are all trying to help me bring that money back, and it's a convoluted deal to try to different ways that it could happen. You want to comment on that, Chris? So as we said today, we're still working on some of those things. Gave you a folder in front of you. Just for your information, there's a page that says without water we don't exist. I put this one page, or actually my intern did here a while back. I want to point out a couple things to you. The amount of grants that we've given to small municipals, and there's also a sheet here that shows you the 24 and the 25 communities that received funding. Whoops, that's not the right one. Yes, the one with the map on it and the stars. Just to try to make things very simple for you to explain to other people when you have questions through the summer, all of that money that was sent out to those or authorized for those communities, they have to send in invoices to be paid. They're reimbursed on a quarterly basis for strictly the expenditures based upon the plan that was approved through the water office. Some of those grant recipients, their median city income from sales tax is about $235,000. And I contrasted that with the city of Hayes. That's the upper right-hand side. City of Hayes has a 50-cent sales tax initiative that goes for conservation of water. They have two other funds that bring in about $3.5 million each. One is their distribution that they charge houses for, and they're reimbursed water rates there. The second one is for their parks and ball fields and stuff. They recycle water from the wastewater side. That's also about a $3.5 million deal. But they bring in the 23 actual sales tax revenues was $3,908,000. And they're using that, and they put aside about $35 million to try to bring that R9 ranch water up to Hayes and Russell. But that's the difference between what some cities can raise to work on their water systems and what some of the smaller ones that have been awarded these grants are able to do. City of Hayes is 21,000 people, but they have a retail area that they service probably closer to 80,000 people. So a lot of that sales tax is paid by people outside the city of Hayes that come there to shop. The bottom right corner of that, this is just a thought, but the statewide sales tax, if we had a 0.2%, if we went from 6.5 to 6.7, that'd raise a little over $100 million a year. Politically, that's a very heavy load. I don't know if that would pass the public's or be politically acceptable. What do you guys think? Doug?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And you know, that was one of the original things when 2302 came to birth that, you know, I was very strongly for a dedicated sales tax. And I contend that nobody likes to pay sales tax, but, you know, we capture all those people coming through our state that are driving the interstate, stopping for, you know, bottled water or whatever. And I know there was some opposition in the Senate for a dedicated sales tax, but I still think that is our best source and critical, and probably do the least amount of damage as far as in, you know, in terms of a property tax or something like that. And you know, the reliability, you know, this is my 9th year, and I have sat on the original water committee when it was broke out of the ag way back when, 2017, 2018. And all that money was swept. That $8 million that we were supposed to have been getting for multiple years was never there. So I guess I have sometimes little faith in what's really important, and we're seeing that with, like in the Senate now, changing things. And, you know, state general fund is a good fund, but it's also fickle, and it can come and it can go. And I really think that, you know, we really need to push for some kind of a dedicated sales tax, you know, that may be even in the form of constitutional amendment, letting the people vote on it. And I think, you know, at the timing, when 2302, we had a perfect storm in a way because of the widespread, extensive drought, and particularly down in our country, which is normally 42-inch of rain a year, we would have had probably a good chance of getting a sales tax initiative passed by the voters had that been on a ballot at that time. So, you know, Missouri's had a 1/8 of 1 mil of a sales tax levy for years to fund their conservation program. And we've talked about a lot of things, you know, a dedicated conservation fund, and maybe somehow we need to be able to join those. The conservation fund, due to the agencies that's involved in it, is a little more controversial. So our chances of probably getting, you know, a dedicated fund that would maybe support several of our venues that are real similar, and we're seeing this. So we got this hodgepodge of agencies that all do a little bit of conservation, and it's difficult to manage. I don't know that I'm necessarily for a natural resource commission, because I've went through some reorganizations and it didn't save much money. You had to change your decals on your trucks, you had to change your letterhead, you had to change your uniforms and patches, and in the end, state government's notorious for instead of eliminating a position, they just change the title and pay you the same. So it doesn't save a lot of money, but I really am strongly for some kind of a dedicated funding for water conservation, and certainly I think sales tax is probably one of our only venues to go about that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Gary White.
Thank you. Good point. And thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, we on the Water Committee are ambassadors, and we have to quit thinking about our district and the whole state of Kansas. You guys all know that. The lovely representative from the Hayes area did not support us, because look what we're doing at Hayes, and this is what we want to do. We need to embrace her and say, this is what we want to do at the state of Kansas. The whole state has a water infrastructure. I've been saying, you know, hey, we need a committee for the lakes. We need a committee for subsurface. We need committee for irrigators. We need committee for city drinking water. It can be split up so many different ways, and there's so much depth to it. This committee we're all encompassing. There's not enough of us. We need to be good ambassadors and sell this. Sales tax carve-out would be perfect. Hayes did it. Hey, she should be on board and understand what we're trying to do. But everybody's well, my little town, we're taking care of our infrastructure. Really, are you? Go upstream a little bit. Are you helping out with them? No. Well, then you're going to be out of water. We've got to learn to sell this nicely. And we're ambassadors, so let's figure out a good, simple way to sell it to their district. Thank you.
Representative Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think, to be really honest, I would love to legalize weed, and then we can use money from an agricultural product in order to support our water resources in Kansas. but unfortunately, I don't necessarily foresee that happening in the near future. But I do think we have to come up with a long-term dedicated source of funding. The Blue Ribbon Task Force, their recommendation was the sales tax carve-off. The way Missouri did it was through a constitutional amendment, which would potentially be more politically feasible if we don't think it's something that would pass this body. I think we could consider a constitutional amendment. And in Missouri, they have to reaffirm theirs every 10 years, I believe. So there is a sunset on that, and it has to be reaffirmed by the voters. I think that's a good check and balance and a good way to do that. And it's, and I also agree that it's something where, you know, we have travelers, we have other people spending money in our state, and that money would be captured and could be used towards water projects and planning as well. But I definitely think the task force that's being debated, I think that will be an important venue to kind of to reconsider some of these options as well. I know in the original task force, they also had conversations around bonding. They had conversations about a plastic water bottle tax, which maybe wasn't necessarily super liked politically, but I think there are a multiple of options that could be considered, but I think a lot of people go back to the sales tax carve-off as I think the best long-term funding source, and also just the amount of money that it's actually able to generate, I think makes it one of the most, I think just one of the best options. So I'm on board, definitely on board with that, and I think the task force will be a good venue to also push that forward when we get more legislative buy-in from our committee. But, you know, I think we've struggled with, you know, perhaps legislators from across the rotunda or people not in our committee, as we've mentioned, not knowing as much about the issue or why it's so important to have a dedicated funding source for it. So hopefully the task force will bring in additional legislators and stakeholders to generate buy-in for something like that. In addition to the funding, I do hope that we consider having a conversation next year about reorganization. I know comments were made about, you know, maybe it doesn't result in less employees for state government, but I do think why it's so important is because it's crucial for, you know, right now, water advocacy is working well because we have a legislature that is pushing this issue forward. We have a governor who's pushing this issue forward. The governor's subcommittee on natural resources has been reformed to push this issue forward. There's a special advisor on water that's helping coordinate all of these issues. There's a really overt effort right now to have everyone working together to move water forward, to advocate for water, and that's very intentional. And I think, you know, if the water committee doesn't continue to be appointed by House leadership, or if something happens where those dynamics change, I think it's really easy for this issue to fall to the wayside, which we've seen time and again throughout Kansas's history. And that's why I think it's really important to have an agency that is dedicated to advocating for this resource, including potentially a secretary who is cabinet level, who is in the governor's ear, making the case for continuing to fund and advocate for water programs and projects. In addition to facilitating the further coordination of our agencies and experts, you know, with in the future when maybe we won't have all of these intentional efforts to bring stakeholders together and push these issues forward. So I do think that it is a really important part of the equation, especially as we talk about significantly increasing funding. You know, if we're talking about $140 million, like what was proposed in the long-term strategic vision and planning process, I think that would be served really well by an organization that is under one roof, working together in one direction towards common goals. And so I hope that we potentially have a hearing on that next year, or push that conversation forward, maybe in the task force setting. Maybe that's a conversation that will be had there, but I think that is part of the equation. And I think this long-term strategic framework is part of the equation, and I hope, I look forward to seeing what the task force comes up with in that regard, because We know money is really important, and having a really good plan for how we're going to address this over the next 40 years and beyond is really important. So I think those are all critical elements, and I'm grateful for the work of the committee and the progress we've made so far, and I look forward to seeing the result of the task force, hopefully, provided that it passes, and the work that we continue to do next year as well. So thank you.
Representative Stocksdale.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just on a positive note, Representative Vaughn and I come from a totally urban area. And once a month, we have what we call Senate 7 Forum. We have the 4 representatives that are in Senate 7's district and Senator Corson and so on. And we just had our 51st monthly meeting on this. And I brought up water every single time. And I've never had a single person in any of our forums do anything but agree, because I've always said that I think water is our #1 issue in the state of Kansas. Everything else depends upon us having water. And that is maybe the one issue that everybody seems to be in agreement with. So I hope you don't think that it's just a rural issue, because we bring up obviously the necessity for water conservation and usage and so on in the rural parts of the state, and they are totally on board with doing whatever needs to be done to make sure that we have adequate water supplies for irrigators and for water resources and so on in the rural parts of the state. But I think that there's a lot of support for even more concentration on water from the urban parts of the state as well. So I think that's a very good sign that both rural and urban are on board with this, and we've always said this is a nonpartisan issue. This is a Kansas issue. And I do think we have to be ambassadors out there for this issue, and I think this committee's done an excellent job of that. So thank you.
Representative Pickert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with all the previous speakers about a tax for water. I mean, you said it, Representative, it's an issue that everybody needs. I mean, people traveling through the state. I mean, so I think it would be a fairly easy sell, for a constitutional amendment or however we decide to do it. But another issue that I think we need to be looking at is education about conservation. And I tried to bring up on my phone the email that I received from Heather. I'd ask her to look into conservation efforts in states, especially around the Midwest. And there are a couple states that have some really pretty rigorous conservation education plans, like Texas is one of them. I haven't had time to really dive into it, but I'd like to see that develop. The water office, Kansas Water Office is hiring somebody. I don't know if they've chosen their final candidate. You're close, okay, to kind of oversee education in the state, but one person can't do it all. And so, but I think that effort would really be helpful, because people are so clueless, really. As long as water's coming out of the tap and they can flush their toilet, well, we have plenty of water, so.
Representative Blex, and we'll shut it down
For
here
a second time, and I think that's one area we really failed in, and I kind of apologize. I should have brought that up, is a conservation measure. We kind of covered that in education when we done 2302. We really didn't beat that drum as well as it is. There is a lot of already conservation, certainly out west with the technology on irrigation issues that are improved a lot, but we really didn't beat that drum like we should have, and that should have been brought to more of the people's attention. And rather than framing it as education, we need to certainly frame that as water conservation. I mean, and it's in there, water conservation is in education, but we kind of failed to really push that, probably what we should have, at least in my opinion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Just a few comments from me. I put the example down of what Hayes had done on water. They bought that R9 ranch 30 years ago in 95. So they've owned that thing for 30 years. They've put together $35 million. They're conserving and using as little water as anybody in the state in the municipal area. I think they're kind of a shining example, like Sheridan 6 and Wichita County WCAs are on irrigation efficiencies. As you're out and about this summer, contact each other and talk about water. Go to the local groundwater management district meetings and things like that, or your basin advisories. One thing I have not told you, I did request from Leadership Coordinating Council 2 days of meeting this summer, hopefully maybe in August, for the water committee to go to Tuttle Creek Reservoir and tour their sedimentation reduction plan, their high pressure injection there at Tuttle Creek. We'll see if that's approved maybe in April or June. This is the next time that they meet. 1 day to travel so that your travel expenses are paid, and then 1 day of actually being there. I'd like to work down the Kaw River a little bit and see some of the stations where they're checking the quality of water and trying to find out how we're affecting downstream.
1 day for fishing.
That's on your own, Gary. Yes, go ahead. You can talk about geological.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple other water events I just wanted to plug for the committee for this coming year. The Kansas Geological Survey does an awesome field tour every single year if you've never been on it, especially for freshman members. It's one of the coolest experiences I've had as a legislator. We visit different parts of the state every year. This year it's going to be the Hutchinson area, and it's a 2-day tour. I think it's June 17th, 18th, if I'm not mistaken. Is that, oh yeah. And I think, I'd have to go back and look at the email. I think it's Hutchinson, Wichita area. I think we're gonna look at the Aquifer Storage and Recovery Project in Wichita, which is a big water project that was done there. And then we also talk about some of the geology formations. I think we're gonna visit the salt mines. And there are a couple other things that will be done, but we go as a group as legislators, and it's a really fun time. They have a social in the evenings. We get to see a different part of the state and learn about the geology and water issues in that part of the state. So that's really cool. I love to plug that. And then I also love to plug the Governor's Water Conference. Happens in November, and that is an awesome experience. There are legislators and water stakeholders and people who come from all over the state to talk about some of the big issues in water from across Kansas, and that's usually before Thanksgiving. Do you guys have a date yet? Is that? Is it okay if Connie addresses the committee regarding the conference? And that was the 12th and 13th of November for folks online. Okay. In Manhattan. Mm-hmm. Yes. Always in Manhattan. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, committee. I think the more you talk to people, you find out we all kind of have the common goal of where we want to get to be. Sometimes we have different routes of getting there. And the discussions that we have in this room and across the state will kind of distill things down to the one that's acceptable to everybody. Before we leave today, I want to personally thank our staff. Tony, my office assistant, has put in lots of hours and some crazy things that we do in this committee. Right, Tony? Heather and Julia from Legislative Research, thank you. And Kyle, you've been I think I started you back in early November working on bills. Hopefully we'll wind up soon. Any update on the task force bill over in the Senate? Okay, I guess we'll find out soon. They should be out of committee by now.
And our IT guy over there.
Yes, thank you. You've been here most of the time, but not all. You guys You guys have a flip a coin to see who wins or something? Well, thank you, staff. Any other comments for the good of the committee? If not, I thank you for your hard work, and we'll continue this same process about 10 months from now. Thank you. Adjourned.